The morning after the explosive night with Rajan felt like a blur to Neha. The sheets around her still smelled of his cologne. The warmth of his body still etched into her skin. She hadn't expected to feel this. Alive. Yet here she was, pacing in her bedroom, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Was this what she truly wanted? The question haunted her, like a melody that kept playing over and over again. She had always prided herself on being in control, on knowing exactly who she was and what she wanted. But Rajan made her question everything. She couldn't deny the raw attraction she felt for him, the way he had touched her, his dark eyes burning with unspoken promises. There was no room for anything soft with Rajan. He took what he wanted, and in return, she gave herself over to him, no questions asked. But was it enough? Was it just physical? Or was there something deeper stirring inside her? The invitation. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Rajan. She hesitated before opening it, feeling the familiar flutter in her chest. "I need you tonight, 8 p.m. Don't keep me waiting." It was blunt, just like him. But she could feel the weight of his words, an expectation, a need. She could feel the pull of it in her gut, in her chest, in every part of her body that still burned from the previous night. It was as if he had put a spell on her. She couldn't resist. "I'll be there." She typed, her fingers trembling slightly. The power play. That evening, Neha arrived at Rajan's penthouse, the same luxurious space where she had spent the night. But this time, the air was different. The heavy scent of anticipation was thick, almost suffocating. She could feel it pressing against her as she stepped inside. Rajan stood by the window, looking out over the city. His back was to her, but the moment she entered, he turned, his dark eyes locking onto hers with the same intensity. "You look stunning," he said, his voice low, controlled. Neha felt a shiver of appreciation, but also something else, something darker. His presence seemed to fill the room, almost suffocating her. She was both drawn to him and afraid of him. "Are you ready for what's to come?" Rajan asked, stepping toward her. His gaze never left hers. She swallowed, her throat dry. "I'm not sure," she whispered, though she knew the truth. She was ready. A dangerous game. Dinner was a mere distraction. The real game began once the plates were cleared, and the room grew quieter. Rajan stood, motioning for Neha to follow him. They moved to a private, candlelit lounge inside the penthouse, a space designed for intimate encounters. The air was thick with tension, and the dim lighting added to the charged atmosphere. Rajan poured them both glasses of deep red wine, his gaze never leaving her. "You're playing with fire, Neha," he said softly. "You know that, don't you?" Neha met his eyes, feeling the heat of his words coil inside her. "I think I want to play," she responded, her voice steady but with a tremor of uncertainty beneath it. Rajan took a step closer, his lips curling into a knowing smile. "You don't understand how dangerous this can be." Neha's heart raced. She wasn't sure if it was the danger he spoke of or the desire that seemed to pull her closer to him. But before she could think any further, Rajan was on her, his lips crashing against hers in a searing kiss. Her breath caught as she surrendered to him, to the pull that had been growing between them since the moment they met. He was all-consuming, and she couldn't resist him any longer. Surrendering to temptation, Rajan's hands roamed her body with a deliberate slowness, each touch setting her skin on fire. She could feel his control, the way he led their movements, the way his presence demanded submission. His fingers traced the curve of her neck, then slowly slid down to her waist, pulling her closer. Neha felt the heat between them building, the desire bubbling up inside her like an unstoppable force. But it wasn't just physical. It was raw, unfiltered. Every kiss, every touch was a demand, an assertion of power. "Do you trust me?" Rajan whispered, his lips brushing against her ear. Neha nodded, her breath ragged. She didn't know if it was trust or something else, something that drew her into him with a force she couldn't explain. She wasn't just following him anymore. She was following herself. The depths of passion. As the night wore on, their bodies intertwined, lost in the sheer intensity of their desire. There were no words left between them, only breathless gasps and the rhythmic sound of hearts racing in sync. Rajan's hands were everywhere, claiming her, taking control of every inch of her body. But Neha wasn't fighting it anymore. She gave in. In that moment, there were no boundaries. There was no right or wrong. There was only the passion that consumed them both, the fire that burnt so fiercely, it threatened to swallow them whole. Neha had crossed a line, and she didn't care. The morning after, the next morning, the silence between them was deafening. Neha sat on the edge of the bed, her body sore but sated, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Rajan was already up, standing by the window again, watching the sun rise over the city. She wasn't sure what to say. There was so much between them now, so many layers that had been peeled away in the heat of the night. Do you regret it? Rajan's voice cut through the silence. Neha shook her head, her fingers tracing the edge of the blanket. No, she whispered. I don't. And she didn't. But deep down, she knew that this was just the beginning, to be continued.